Hi, I'm Jessie Haley. I'm the program manager for creative writing at the University of Chicago. Thank you for joining us for our third live faculty reading in the Writers in Residence series. You can see the past events and including pre-recorded and live readings on our YouTube channel where you are right now. If you're a student and you're interested in participating, you can find out more details at our website, creativewriting.uchicago.edu. You can also see our schedule for upcoming faculty readings there. Next week, we will have a live reading on Tuesday, May 5th, featuring prose by Sharon Pomerantz and Benjamin Lytle. That'll be at 12:30 p.m. CST. On Thursday, we will premiere a pre-recorded reading, prose and poetry by Garen Chaikel and Stephanie Swallow. That'll be at 5 p.m. CST. Today, we're very excited to welcome Lina Ferreira Cabeza-Vanegas and Jennifer Scappettone, who will both be reading translation work. Lina will go first. She's the author of Drowned Sever Sing from Anomalous Press and Don't Come Back from Mad Creek Books. And she's also the co-editor of a forthcoming anthology on the Great American Essay. Her fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and translation work has been featured in various journals, including the Bellingham Review, the Chicago Review, Fourth Genre, Brevity, and more. She teaches nonfiction for us. Thank you, Lina.
Thanks, Jessie. Thank you so much, Jessie. Thank you to John Wilkinson and Rachel Galvin and Jennifer Scappettone, who will be reading after me. It's very gracious and generous of everybody to be putting these things together. I'm going to be reading from translated poetry, which is not usually what I read from. I usually read nonfiction, and this is from a forthcoming book from Mad Creek Books titled 100 Refutations, which I'm going to just give a little bit of context for because it's a strange project to be reading from in this particular juncture. And it made me sort of like really consider my work and my place in this country and the world. In 2016, I was in my grandmother's living room. I've told this story so many times, it's a bit strange, but I was getting a visa for another university, for Virginia Commonwealth University, where I was working at the time, where I was about to start work. And it's this very common thing that I'd gotten so accustomed to doing. I would go home and I would stand outside the embassy. You have to stand on the opposite side of the street. The US embassy, Colombia used to have the largest US embassy until the invasion in the Middle East. And it's this giant bunker and it's intimidating, and they don't let you inside. They don't even let you cross the street. They do the perimeter, and then there's this giant megaphone that's sort of like the cable twists and turns up this fence, and it just blooms like a white flower, and it yells, you cannot step through. And if you cross the street, they clearly have cameras all around. They sort of like yell at you to sort of like cross back into the street. So you just stand there holding like all your documents, everything that proves that who you are and who you're not. And you wait for this megaphone to say numbers 142 through 169, and then you can cross the street, and then they can take your phone away, and then you can go into this inner sanctum of walls thicker than I am long. And then you can get a new visa to come into this country. So I was there very briefly to get yet another visa, of which I've had almost every possible one. And the radio was on. It was 2016. The Trump had just been elected. And from the radio in the kitchen, I hear these words that later on NPR voices will debate about whether it's going to be shithole countries or shit house and how much that matters. But in reality, when they were translated, they were just translated as shit countries, países de mierda. So it didn't matter. It didn't make any difference. The way we heard it is we are shit. And the voices from the kitchen, as I was standing in my grandmother's living room, which is she was my first literature, the first person to ever tell me stories, are stories that I still think about still every day, more than any other book I've ever read. The voices say, well, that's definitely Venezuela. And if it's Venezuela, then it must also be us. And they're figuring out the scatological taxonomy of shit house, shit hole, países de mierda. And I'm just standing there under this virgin that my grandmother like had her entire life, this very famous Ecuadorian shape, because this is where she got the virgin, because this was once a whole country. The Great Colombia was Ecuador, Venezuela, and Colombia, and this virgin is balancing on this upturned moon like the edge of a scythe, and she's digging her heel into the blurred face of a wide-mouthed snake. And they are telling me that I am in a shithole country, and therefore all by extension is tainted, and that my grandmother's literature is also that, and this virgin is also that. And I became incredibly enraged, and I couldn't speak. I could only scream. And I remember screaming because I remember losing my voice while I was screaming. And I kept saying, like, how dare they? How is this possible? Like, yet again, because I am in the middle of like getting yet another visa, yet another like permission to be able to come to this country and pay taxes here and have the privilege of teaching and educating. And I am being told yet again the thing that I am or I'm not. And it's up in debate because it might not be us. It might be something else. It might just be Africa this time, but isn't that kind of the same? Or not the same, or worse. So I didn't know what to do. And the thing that I ended up doing that night, because I can't, at the time, I didn't have any sort of protection. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't speak, not really. And I still feel like I can't. I couldn't say anything online that would jeopardize me getting that visa. The only purpose I was in Colombia, the only times that I like purposely went back to my country, a country I love, so that I could leave it again. So I translated a poem from one of these shithole countries and I posted it on Facebook. And then the next day I did the same, and the next day I did the same, and I did the same. And translating, for the record, is an incredibly time-consuming endeavor. So I wasn't doing anything else. I was just translating. That's all I did. And I had this idea, I'll just do it for 100 days because it seemed like a good number. And one thing led to another, led to another. I ended up doing it for 6 months, but 100 still felt right. So I called it 100 refutations, because I kept hearing these arguments that weren't arguments, because you can't argue with something that doesn't even have a premise. And if it had a premise, it would be false, which is that you aren't human. And I thought, if the only way that I could think to speak back to an argument that isn't an argument, to refute such a thing, would be to with evidence that is completely irrefutable. And for me, that was poetry. If I show you a poem, you cannot deny the humanity of a person. Like, poetry is like weeds and it does not need permission to grow. I got my green card 2 weeks before the stay-at-home order. But more importantly, not the stay-at-home order, but 2 weeks before the announcement that green cards would be halted. And I'm having a difficult time with this, like a difficult moment trying to struggle and think around this project that was once this thing and is now this other thing, and now it's going to be published by Mad Creek Books. But the only reason, like, I have no intention of getting any like revenue for this. The only reason was I wanted it to exist, so that if you Googled one of these shithole countries, there would be something else that would come up. And now I'm told that I am safe, and I'm not sure what that means. So I'm going to be reading from it and hoping, like I hoped before, because there have been, all these things have happened before, all these moments have happened. And the only thing that we can hope for is that we will be changed by them in some way. Someone once told me, beware a man who can go through hell and remain unchanged. So I think the thing that we can do while we're indoors is perhaps try to figure out how we should be changing and how we should remain changed after that. So I'm going to be reading a few poems from it. Because that was enough of a preamble. In my defense, I am usually a nonfiction writer, but here we go. This is a poem by Enrique Noriega. He's from Guatemala, so I'm going to be jumping around. And it's one of my favorite poems. It's called A Man Dressed in White. A man dressed in white looks like the inside of a doctor's clinic, but only that. Looks like a liter of milk from back when my grandmother bought her own liters of milk, but only that. Looks like the severe mourning of a Japanese man, but only that. Looks like the fondled dove of peace, but only that. Looks like the nightmare of the blank page of the writer who produces nothing, but only that. Looks like a tortured mind emptied of screams, but only that, because you would have to know a man dressed in white is only that. A man dressed in white, and that, a child, from the streets of Rio de Janeiro or of Guatemala with a coup de grace to his temple is only that. A child of the street with a coup de grace to his temple. I want to say that it would seem that a man dressed in white or a child from the street with a coup de grace to his temple were something else to a man dressed in white or a child from the streets with a coup de grace to his temple. But what doubt could there be? A man dressed in white is only that, and a child from the streets with a coup de grace to his temple also is only that. This is, I translated a lot of poetry. I can't remember how much. At some point I thought it was 180 poems or something like that. This is the only one that I didn't read before translating. I read the title and I contacted her. I'm like, I don't care what it is. The title is fantastic. I'm gonna publish it. It might have been that I was sleep deprived when I made that decision, but I stand by it. It's one of my favorite poems. It's by Lina Herrera. She's from Panama, and this is called The Existential Nothingness of Crabs. I make verses in the air, they crackle toward the infinite prophecy, crackling, crackling. I dance, building with my feet a trampoline of clouds. I twirl like a ram. Now I am a she-Christ, now navigator, now face up, now about to expire. My wings leveled in a dive. Yesterday, again, I leapt from the bridge of the Americas. Today, I stare at my naked feet upon the earth. I write plummeting parachute poems. I will not return to the place of butterflies. This is a little bit of a shift. Both those poets are pretty new. I contacted them. They were very gracious to allow me to translate their poetry. This is a very famous poet. This is Alfonsina Storni, an Argentinian poet, perhaps one of the most important that Latin America has produced, and Argentina is not without poets. This is called Little, Little Man. Little, little man, set free your canary, for she wants to fly. For I am her, little man, let me leap. I've been in your cage, little man who gives me a cage. I say little because you have neither understood me, nor will you ever understand. I don't understand you either, but in the meantime, open for me this cage. I want to escape, little man. I loved you half a wing's worth. Don't ask me for more. This is another Latin American female poet, poetisa. And if you are ever translating poetry and really want to like have some sort of balance, because there are so many men and not a lot of women, I bought I think something like 46 poetry anthologies in the process, trying to find some sort of balance. There is one country that disproportionately produces female poets, and that's Uruguay. I don't know why. I don't want to think about it too much. It's not Colombia, where I'm from. But go to Uruguay. I don't know what they do, but they do something right. This is Delmira Agustini, false account. The black crows are hungry for rose red meat. Upon a deceitful moon, I cast my reflection. They break their beaks upon it, banging them against the glass. And as I part, ironic, untouched, and glorious, my black crows fly away, having grown tired of rose red meat. Muck, love, and cold. Marble that tedium varnished to stony flames, or lily that blush wrapped in roses red, always that which belongs to my God. Fecund rosary beads, living shirt collar that closes in around the world's neck, chain of the earth, constellation fallen, oh, rosary beads magnetized by snakes, glimmering to the end between my fingers, that within your smile, 50 teeth full, with a big kiss, my life was set aflame, a rose made of lips. I think I'm coming to the end, so I'll only read two more. This is Clementine Suarez. She's a Honduran poet. I don't think she's been particularly widely translated, but there's one book out there which has her biography and her poetry. It was translated by Janet Gold. Janet Gold's translation is brilliant. If you have a chance to go read it, I strongly recommend it. This is Clementine Suarez, Homeless. I come, I go, and then I think that it's all the same, here or there. There is no place gained, that here, like there, I am what people call a stranger. And like a stranger, I will come and go until here, like there, neither I nor anyone will be. Just I think tomorrow. This is Monday Song by Vicente Acosta. He was born in 1867 and 1908, and the only reason that I know everyone's birth dates is because copyright-free poetry is great. Monday Song by Vicente Acosta. You smoke, you fit in the ashtray too. You contemplate, turned off by the fire, your home, and you watch man betraying man, eve of another day without mourning. The betrayal, the one hand washing the other as both spite the face. I was going to read Nine Monsters, but that one's really widely known. So these are two poems about the short. This is Eliana Munoz, a Colombian poet, and it's called The Beautiful Text. Turn kamikaze, the poem was a bloody gob of spit, riddled with the tuberculosis of history that burst in the empty whiteness of my heart. She was also very gracious to let me translate that. So this is the last poem I will read. It's by Nezahualcóyotl. He was not a Mexica poet, but he was a leader of his people. He was from the Alcua people, I think. Acolua, I think is pronounced, which is a Nahuatl people. And the only thing that you need to know is that the word flowers or petals was synonymous with poetry. So when he talks about poetry, that's what he talks about. And this is a poem that I come back to frequently when I feel like maybe writing is a little bit pointless in a world where there's so much happening, because maybe flowers are important too, and making wreaths consoles those who bury their dead. There Will Be No End to My Flowers by Nezahualcóyotl, 1402 to 1472. There will be no end to my flowers, nor a ceasing to my song. I, singer, in singing lift, while they split and spread. Even after they have wilted and yellowed, they will be taken in, carried into the house of the gold-plumed bird. Thank you. Oh, here we go. Jesse said this, like, remember to do this. And I got emails saying, you're gonna forget to do this. And then I forgot to do this, but I apologize. Okay, here we go. Now we're going to hear from Jennifer Scappettone. Her work at the crossroads of poetry, research, translation, and transmedia literary arts. Her books include Killing the Moon, Modernism in Venice, and the poetry collection From Dame Quickly and the Republic of Exit 43. Her translation of the polyglot poet and refugee from fascist Italy, Emilia Rosselli, were collected in La Locomotrix, published by the University of Chicago Press, and she curates the Italian wing of the online audiovisual poetry archive Pen Sound. Now, Jen.
Thank you so much, Lina. That was such a powerful project, and all of the poems were really helpful to hear in this moment. I've prepared this short reading in honor of May Day, which is a Chicago tradition. And I happen to translate mostly from Italian, where the tradition of this strike is a very powerful tradition. As many of you who have been to Italy and have not had a train come or something like that have probably experienced. I'm going to start with reading from Locomotrix. This is a book that is a bilingual edition, and I just want to mention that it's important to support presses, university presses and small presses that publish translations during this period, and to realize that there are many artifacts that don't appear online, and there are technical reasons for that. There's no ebook of Locomotrix, Selected Poetry and Prose of Emilia Rosselli, because ebooks don't do bilingual en face editions. So that's just a sad fact of the virtual world, that we're actually missing lots of publishing artifacts that would be helpful for us to have in a moment like this. I'm just going to start with a poem called General Strike 1969 in solidarity with the striking essential workers of Amazon, Walmart, Whole Foods, and others. This was written by Rosselli after having taken part in this general strike. And right now I'm going to say goodbye to you as a face and show my screen. So you'll be seeing the face of Amelia Rosselli as I read this poem of hers. Okay, is that working now? Okay. Sciopero generale 1969. Lampade accesissime e nell'urlo d'una quieta folla rocambolesca trovarsi lì a far sul serio, cioè rischiare. Che nell'infantilismo apparente schianti anche il mio potere di infischiarmene. Un Dio molto interno poteva bastare, non bastò a me il mio egoismo, non bastò a queste genti il sapore d'una ricchezza nella rivincita del resto strozzata. Dovevamo esprimere il meglio, regalarsi ad una retorica che era urlo di protesta ad una distruzione impavida nelle nostre impaurite case. Persi da me quell'amore al verticale, a solitario Dio, rivoluzionandomi nella gente, asportandomi dal cielo. General Strike 1969. Lamps wholly alight and in the howl of a calm, audacious crowd, to find yourself there, acting with seriousness, taking risks. May this apparent childishness shatter even my own power not to give a damn. A deep inner God could have sufficed. My egotism did not suffice for me. The taste of riches in a revenge, nonetheless smothered, did not suffice for these people. We had to express something better, allow ourselves this rhetoric that was a howl of protest against undaunted destruction in our frightened houses. I lost on my own that vertical love of solitary God, revolutionizing myself in the people, removing myself from heaven. I'm going to shift gears here and show you a bit of an experimental translation project that involved the labor of many of my colleagues here at the University of Chicago and also my students. So Rachel Galvin, who curated this series, Edgar Garcia, and many of my students in mine and Hans Saucy's translation class lent their voices to this project. So I thought this was a great opportunity to show it off. So the pair of page spreads I am showing you here represent the analog transcription of a virtual chorus, utopian in conception and materialized first and foremost within the space of an app that I will soon share. It was tactically humbling to translate this poem from audible vibration and light passing through filters, liquid crystals, and electrodes onto reticent paper. These pieces are outtakes of a performance and installation work developed in collaboration with artists Judd Morrissey of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and Abraham Avnizan of Kent State. Lament, or The Mine Has Been Opened Up Well, first presented at the Gray Center for Arts and Inquiry 2 days after the election of Donald Trump in November 2016. The work is composed through choral readings of encrypted Copper Company telegrams and transmutations of pop song lyrics written by Johnny Burke in 1936 for microphone crooner Bing Crosby. A long time ago, a million years BC, the best things in life were absolutely free. But no one appreciated a sky that was always blue. This work aims to occupy the technologies that make Zoom and YouTube convenings possible in counter-futurist fashion, pouring backwards and forwards to expose their veins in and into so-called real-world environments. Focusing on copper's status as the conductive foundation of modern transnational telecommunications networks, including the internet. The pieces sound the environmental and social implications of this chemical element's extraction, processing, and salvage. They sound, that is, in both senses of the word. They plumb the depths of these processes in submarine cable routes and the mining operations at their foundation. They translate those depths into audible shudderings of air. These soundings attend our manufactured hallucination of ghosted technologies and currency through virtual and augmented reality to express the material fallout of such apparently ethereal phenomena as the cloud, sensuously. Don't you know each cloud contains pennies from nether, designating what lies beneath the earth, native to hell or the underworld? I'm going to be sharing one act of this larger collaborative performance installation work, which constitutes an experimental translation and which takes the form of an app titled Pennies from Nether. For the purposes of this Zoom reading, I recorded a couple of minutes of this piece during my daily outing along the shore of Chicago's disaster proclamation last evening. Armed with this app, users navigating their way among voices made to materialize as pence before the camera eye of their tablets and phones might be moved to imagine the migrations not only of copper, but of the aluminum and silicon inside those devices, their compounds of lithium oxide, indium oxide, plastic, and glass, as well as the potential conflict minerals within. And they might imagine, by extension, the variegated all-over plosions of bust and boom. On November 11th, 2016, The Telegraph reported that the Trump effect propelled copper to its best week in 30 years. As of July 2018, mining.com had announced that Trump started the metals rally. Now he's the reason it's ending. In Scottish dialect, a nether refers to oppression or stress, a withering or stunting influence. In mining lingo, it designates a trouble, a fault or dislocation in a seam of capitalizable material. The libretto of this piece was composed by writing through the lyrics of Johnny Burke and Bing Crosby, plundering the language of telegraph code books sold to capitalists and copper entrepreneurs in the heyday of telegraphy for the purpose of economizing and encrypting sensitive messages. These codes required extensive and filigreed labors of translation at the sending and receiving ends. We find an uptick in their use in correspondence between managers and investors during periods of labor strife, particularly in the 19-teens. During the Great Strike of 1913 at the Calumet and Hecla Mining Company on Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula, for example, whose consequences were memorialized by Woody Guthrie's song, 1913 Massacre. The code words contained within these alternative lexicons translated frequently used phrases into defamiliarizing condensed natural languages, and they harbor a material unconscious of non-alternative facts that we can access nowhere else. Investment encodes the apparently common memo that we have a good deal of difficulty with the natives, for instance, and the code word for copper wire is shuddering. Proposed translated into profited, wire becomes whiteness. Chain cable encrypts the order to cover all emergencies. In one code book, nether was the word for nature. In the piece I'm going to share, but which was pre-recorded so as to be able to share it with you here, visitors wielding an iPad can navigate their way through a shower of pennies, each coin conveying the voice of another comrade in translation who agreed to translate 4 lines from the libretto. The languages necessary to carry on the transnational business of copper mining and smelting are and have been numerous, and so were my solicitations. Some translators sang into their phones. Some recorded recitations from subway platforms in New York. One sent in a file via email from noisy Mysuru. My idea was to forge a destabilizing chorus from below, rekindling the dream of global solidarity expressed in the lyrics of the industrial workers of the world's Little Red Songbook, still in print from a small publishing house in Rogers Park, even if such a song of solidarity could never manifest in instantaneous flesh. A precise sense of collective suffering and determination was cultivated not only through the Wobblies' direct actions, but through language work after all, through their many acts of translation. And here is the piece.
Alltaf þegar rignir, þá rignir arfbærum hvítþvotti,
每当下雨，
framlögðum
雨是
sendingum.
收益的白木集提议的路线。
Cada vez que llueve, lucrado la encurioseo, propuesta.
Every time it rains. Profited.
Chaque fois qu'il pleut, blé
Toda
moignage
vez que chove, chove.
câblage proposé.
Immer wenn es regnet, regnet es.
Joka
Profitiert,
kerta kun sataa,
weiß der Glaube, Bescheid.
Chaque fois qu'il pleut,
elke keer als het regent. Het regent wens, geven.
Kishi. Profitira la Belina.
Nuke diti se çdo re përmbante të mbytshme, shi produktin për çdo emergjence. Sa herë bieshi në të ardhurën e bandit. Telat e
Вали спечелено и издаване, предложени. Не знаеш ли, че всеки облак съдържа
progrediu filtração, propôs criação. Você não sabe que cada nuvem contém cabo corrente.
Corte a saída.
That's what
Siga todas as origens. Toda vez que chove, chove, progrediu, filtração.
Cada palavra que para ti decir em nome de cada Deus. Agora diz o que cada sido conferia aqui.
And to close, I wanted to share with you a few lines from a translator and poet and labor activist that I discovered over the course of this project, whose name is Arturo Giovannitti, born in 1884 in Italy and who died in the Bronx in 1959. This person is best remembered for his work organizing the 1912 Bread and Roses strike, but he was also a poet in both Italian and English. And I think that his words really resonate in a moment in which blaming other countries for the coronavirus is resulting in an inflamed nationalism. In the poem that I'm just going to read one stanza from, La saggezza del mare, or the wisdom of the sea, Giovannitti reimagines the space of the nation as that of a mobile ship between terrains. Assai giusto ed assai buono di certo sarebbe per rendere a tutti la più bella la vita e men grave la morte, se come l'oceano libero a tutti ed aperto, libera fosse la terra ed ogni paese una nave. It would certainly be so just and good to render to all a more beautiful life and less grave death, if like the ocean, free to all and open, the land were free and every country a ship. Thank you. And many thanks to Jessica Haley for organizing this. Please check out our next readings, which will be on the same YouTube live